South China Morning Post, 7th of April 2024, the lives of the Chinese people must come first to improve U.S.-China ties. Foreign workers are reluctant to travel to China because of the country's hostage diplomacy policy, which leaves no foreigners safe. While visiting China recently with my Northwestern Kellogg students, we were all surprised by the number of Americans who had left the nation after its zero-COVID policy ended in December 2022. Our tour guide had only planned one other U.S. school group stay in Shanghai thus far, and she only anticipated booking one more this year, a dramatic decrease from the 30 or more she had booked every year before the pandemic. We were meant to be the first American group to visit Guilin since the beginning of 2020, where the famous mountains, a UNESCO World Heritage site, had once been among the most visited locations on Earth. This year, only 2 more are anticipated. I hope they are low estimations. There have been and will continue to be more. Unquestionably, though, the number of Americans visiting China has been sluggish to rebound after plunging during the outbreak. The U.S.-China relationship is at its lowest point since President Richard Nixon visited Chairman Mao Zedong in 1972, and this dramatic deterioration coincides with that. Zero-sum rivalry, if not outright antagonism, has become the dominant topic of conversation in the public discourse of both countries. Chinese media is adamant that American democracy is untrue and that China's growth and development are being unfairly contained by the U.S., even though U.S. politicians and pundits from all political persuasions depict China as the country's economic and geopolitical threat. The lives and viewpoints of ordinary people receive minimal attention since macroeconomic and geopolitical concerns dominate most news coverage in both nations. There are few opportunities to foster empathy, and the effects are becoming more noticeable. Only 15% of respondents in U.S. opinion polls in 2023 had a favorable view of China, down from 53% in 2018 and 72% in 1989. Particular worries are legitimate. China's arrest of 2 Canadian NGO workers in 2018 is reprisal for Meng Wanzhou's, a Huawei executive accused of aiding her firm in evading Iranian sanctions. Comparatively light house arrest alarmed both Americans and Canadians. Next came the epidemic lockdowns in China, which forced many Americans to flee their homeland. Though entirely understandable, the large-scale departure of Americans and other expats has further restricted information sharing and face-to-face interactions between the corporate and non-governmental organizations of the two nations. When one considers the severe restrictions placed on the operations of Western journalists in China, it becomes clear why many outsiders find the nation so strange and mysterious. Anxiety and uncertainty have replaced the thrilling economic prospects and entertaining vacation tales a few short years ago. Has China, however, seen significant change since 2019? Do Chinese people no longer see markets as having potential? Do they despise Americans? My class traveled to every part of the nation in just 2 weeks. We witnessed numerous Chinese and American businesses in 3 cities, some flourished while others barely survived. Additionally, the students ran through the towns and suburbs to work on various projects. When I asked what stood out the most on our last day, their answers differed. Some were amazed by China's sophisticated economy and clean and well-maintained transportation system. Others commented on how impoverished Shanghai and Hong Kong seemed in comparison, and many mentioned how government surveillance was always in place. However, everyone had been pleasantly pleased by their face-to-face interactions and meetings with Chinese individuals from various backgrounds, including street vendors and the heirs to multi-billion-dollar family companies. The Chinese folks impressed them with their warmth and humility. The encounter encouraged students who had previously been apprehensive or suspicious. One had previously worked in government and assisted in drafting anti-China legislation, another had gone through a protracted U.S.-China standoff in the South China Sea. Many students were concerned about a travel advisory issued by the U.S. Department of State, but they also wanted to learn more about the nation than just what they saw in the media. Both of them felt relieved and happy. One of my pupils snatched a toddler and threw it into the air, causing Chinese youngsters and their parents to giggle. Noodle sellers ensured that students who were not fluent in Chinese were given the same discounts as their Chinese counterparts. People said my kids were a breath of fresh air, just as lively and gregarious as they recalled Americans to be everywhere we went. They enjoyed showing off their work, laughing with him, and taking pictures. These Americans have been missed. They had been concerned that Americans had changed after years of seclusion and bad news. Naturally, Not all Chinese and Americans would get along, and my students did not become instantaneously ardent admirers of China due to the trip. However, it did enable them to understand the intricacy of the second most populated nation in the world. They witnessed directly that the Chinese people are not the same as the Chinese government or what the headlines in the U.S. press might imply. The Chinese people are virtually non-existent in U.S. news coverage. It will take time for the U.S. and China to resolve their numerous disputes. In the interim, we must maintain face-to-face connections. Chinese and Americans should remember their shared humanity, which becomes increasingly significant as their administrations strain